Well, in the spirit of winging it, yesterday I threw out the script, what I would have said today. I'm truly going to wing it. Because I just recently got a much more fun take on all this. I think the essence of the play is the intrusion of patriarchy on feminine culture as personified by Gilgamesh and Lilamine. So I kind of went, okay, what are these two doing? And the heart of that action is I would say, in tablet 2, where they end up having a late night conversation. And Lilamine has had a dream that she proceeds to tell him. I'll read just a few little passages to give you examples of what they actually said. But he, of course, we've seen throughout, he's coming with thinking, planning, building, controlling, and she's all about following the gods and the rites and rituals and dreams, and the fates. And so she starts off with her dream telling, you can force your slaves to scrape up a mountain on the river, but you can't make them dream your dreams. Since you still refuse to sleep yourself, we've had many references to the sleeping, perhaps the unbidden agency of a woman will serve your purpose. He agrees to hear the dream, but don't you try to interpret or predict. I'll do all the thinking, thank you. So in this dream, she is he. So Gilgamesh is doing all these things. So this is a later part of it. Then, as you, I found myself standing high as a bird in the skylighted night, naked with a man's extremity, while people far below pointed arrows up at me to shoot. Is it true that with moonlight, Inanna can make a man extend himself against his will? Oh my gosh, what heresy for Gilgamesh. So there is this curiosity among everybody that why have they not shared a bed? And she says, I'm sadly called the maid of Uruk. We're not in the dream anymore now. I'm sadly called the maid of Uruk, the only one denied our priest by law, yet refused a woman's dignity by the sole pretender. Pretender, I was scanning the world for a place to choose when your optimates sought me out to employ my archers and my thin-lipped axe. So I delivered Ishtar's city from level carnage. But I won't propitiate her with my foreskin. I will not wear her livery just to glorify her cult. So he thinks he's gone along with this plan, having sworn to safeguard their customs and perpetuate their rights. And they talk a little bit about whether that's true. At night, it's just a little mean saying, at night you try to petrify our clay by improving upon the fire of the sun, or dream up levees and ditches to reform our God-given waters. Without a plan from any god, you displace 1,000 households to make room for a twisted tower. And he tells his view of it, which is the tower is an apex to lengthen my bow shot, to look down upon the temptations of power, to give me sooner sight of your attackers, to widen my span of stars, while shortening the hours between sunset and sunrise, to give my men a glimpse of peaks beyond the dust of your horizon, and to combine plan with profile in the perspective of my public works. For the gods, yes, a beacon for them in our middle world of 7 cities, but not least for you as sky house for the tryst. Your canon law stipulates the highest place. As we're going to see, we're working up to a grand sort of New Year's celebration that includes Enlil, Lilamine going to this high trysting place to meet Enlil. And meanwhile, all the other people are celebrating the new year. So they go back and forth about this proposed bargain, and Gilgamesh does not concede to do it, and it ends in a standoff. And so then it proceeds into the action of the rest of the play, which I'll rely on your having read the summary for. And let's hear the reading.
Morning of New Year's Eve. A space outside the temple with tower stairs as before. Stage left. The great double doors to the council hall of the gods are now dominant. A pair of three-legged royal seats stands upstage. The one to the left, occupied by Enlil's council mask. The traders and their interlocutors take foreground downstage positions such that the ceremonies behind them are continuously seen, but only sometimes heard. Eber and the traders enter, carrying their shepherd crooks and the troopers' bows.
The gods have been carried into the chamber of destinies already, so now it's all right to watch, but give those doors a wide berth.
The traders lay down the bows.
Keep those bows out of sight, but I don't think our friends will call for them at such close quarters.
The doors open slowly from within.
After the coronation, you can go celebrate New Year's, when fixed and movable day are the same. It's a feast of reconciliation. Let Gilgamesh call it the sun gods. At least the foolishness is shortened to 24 hours.
Widows, Lil Amin, Optimates, and Rector enter in procession. Lil Amin is dressed as a masked bride.
Father, my heart's as anxious as any native's to hear the messenger hail this new moon, for I fear the vengeance of the God of the world. By speaking slyly, according to your light, you have accepted the Shah's unholy calendar.
The widows, as bridesmaids, beat a rhythm with pestle cymbals. The rector carries a heavy crozier with which he controls the ceremonies by thumping upon the floor. The Optimates close and seal the double doors, while Lil Amin is led to take her seat on the right. They all touch their foreheads to the ground in front of Enlil's empty mask before moving to their places in the ensuing ritual. The rector intones his walking homily with perfunctory formality.
Even from angels, the will of Shaddai is often hid. I am not faultless, maybe. It's a narrow line I tread. By opposing superstition, I strengthen blasphemy. But the king has yielded to my policies as these heathens have yielded to his demand for hell oil. I can only hope to keep the peace while we wait for God's word to reveal itself day by day.
The gods asked one another and chose Enlil to lead their decisions, for when chaos was full, he had saved them from the dragon. With 4 currents of wind, he hewed from earth and water a land of plenty between the 2 great rivers on their course to the sea, and set the black-haired people to attend with sacrifices bountiful and savory the 7 lovely houses of the gods. And first among them was the city of his daughter Inanna. But we have allowed ourselves to be led into grievous strife with her lore. We have menaced her altar with evil. Once again, our manifold wickedness has disordered the spirit of Uruk. In our weakness, we have failed to hold fast the love of our sacred mother. The serene and gracious moon has been taken from our sky, and the pitiless sun means to drink the river from our fields. Our bread is turned to stone. May Enlil look with mercy upon the servants of Inanna, the despair of her heart. Bring the old king before the seat of God to confess his transgressions. May the gods renew this kingship by fatal decree and grant their people another year of life.
Gilgamesh enters from the right, escorted by troopers. He wears a horn crown on his mask and carries the rod and ring. The troopers bury the Triskelion banner as a gonfalon, leaving Gilgamesh near the rector at center. They take up positions opposite the traders downstage, who speak to each other in the foreground. Eber moves as close as possible to Gilgamesh without interfering in the ritual.
They bring in their yearly offering, their choicest harlot on the highest place they've got. If she doesn't pacify the overlord idol, comes fire and brimstone.
Law to them is nothing. Each year beforehand, divine consent to chance is chiseled as their destiny. All their piety goes toward learning how to guess the future. Righteousness does not avail.
The name of the one God, world without end.
His
His
word-
word looms a thundercloud on the horizon.
Amen.
Gilgamesh insisted on going through this. I hope our father can keep him from doing something rash. It would wrong our unborn seed to die for a Gentile, but the troopers don't expect a crisis yet. Tonight, they'll be carousing. Having been born in snow, they exalt in the sun.
Upstage ritual action continues separately. Its music and chanted words merely suggested, except where emerging into the text. The widows and optimates perform.
Thank God this is the year of zero epact. With calendars in conjunction, we can agree for the moment with both kinds of heathen. For us, the pleasure of acquiescence is all too rare.
I don't see how the holidays are going to be so pleasant if the people don't get any friendlier.
These are the days they serve their servants and have their scapegoat lead the revels. They'll welcome circumcised foreigners.
I'd like to be happy in Eric. Why should we abhor the stationary arts and comforts? I didn't ask for Levitical responsibility. It's not my idea to be against these women. In the middle of a dance, who can ponder law?
Famous guest cup is not for us. An orgy is forbidden.
No other nation is tested by self-abnegation.
Confess the insubordination of your rule.
I confess that none of my designs has been handed down from heaven. No God has envisioned my plans or approved them. I have taken it upon myself to make new things and devise more efficacious ways. By me, the polity has been reformed, and idle artisans put to new inventions. In drastic supervision, never have I closed my ear or turned a blind eye. Worst of all, I have altered fate by refusing Ishtar's brand and eschewing her adulterations. If these be offenses to Enlil, then do I admit them.
He satisfies ceremonial form and tone ironically, affecting to pretend that his semantic substitutions are as traditional as the coronation itself. The widows titter at their slow wits. Oh, sorry.
Gilgamesh is right to hold with a man's fatherhood.
As Lugal of Uruk, say what you have done to serve her.
I have given Enlil a ladder down to earth, and the whole sea land a beacon for caravans and boats. It flashes blue sunbeams into the deep of the sky, and its shadow walks across the city to cool the heads of children.
They lure their God with the doctrine of incest.
For trafficking in vile mire, may you be spared the wrath of Enlil, for polluting our city with the smoke of slime.
Incense and orisons vanish like a mist. Even hecatombs are not prolonged, but my free will offering of fired earth winds winds an upward path that will endure for all our gods. Neither can it be pulled down by armies, nor scattered by thunder.
The rector removes Gilgamesh's mask rather abruptly and lays it on Enlil's seat.
Only battered to an anthill by the four winds of El Shaddai.
Gilgamesh solemnly hands the rod and ring to Lilamin, but mockingly bows his face to the ground before her seat instead of Enlil's.
Yield up the rod and ring, and await the proof by custom that you may contend to rule. Bow to the throne of Enlil. Until the king returns, let a stranger bear the retribution. Hark! I hear a knocking. Who knocks for kingship? Enter, Lord of the Epact. Do you swear to serve Uruk, and for love of Inanna, carry from her streets the sins of long dark night?
Enkidu enters, escorted by Norkid. Optimates conduct Enkidu to the rector. Norkid goes to stand with his men. Enkidu looks at Gilgamesh.
Do I? Achoo! Smell feathers make me cough.
Relinquish the purple.
He rips off Gilgamesh's cloak. Aside to Gilgamesh.
Sir, we beg your public indulgence of our traditional immemorial.
Having him as bare as a slave who starts to react but checks himself, the rector then slaps Gilgamesh's face, somewhat harder than protocol requires. This time, the latter responds with an open offer of violence, at which the rector does not flinch.
Lead the dying king to solitude. Let him eat dust and quench his thirst with penance. We must break his pride.
Thumps repeatedly in a drumming beat. But Norkid stops them with a gesture. Rector smiles at him, bowing. Eber restrains Gilgamesh with a touch. The rector smiles at him, bowing ironically, and resumes with ritual intonation.
No salt tears from that prince of men. Contrition never.
Banish this uncircumcised barbarian from the eyes of gods.
The Optimates awkwardly fling a net over Gilgamesh. He remains calm but uneasy, staring back at Enkidu, who has been fascinated by him.
You have all day to put a stop to time, your royal lubalissimus.
Ad lib in various voices, jeering, they taunt him in sing-song and with bits of mocking dance.
Halt the sun with arrows.
Piss up Euphrates, make him flow to the mountains. Forbid the moon to grow.
Draft the masons to wall out Enkidu. Save your neck by axioms.
Prove the theorem that Gizax is more than half immortal.
Waterize your wombs with salt. Glaze out the dew on your eyeballs.
We'll smoke your carcass with stink fire and embalm it with bitumen.
Tiny minds uncork their genius.
Cogitate your freedom, O philosopher king. Reckon away those knots. That battle axe of yours. Hack your way out of that butterfly net.
Gizax, time to go berserk. Show us the rage that your hillbillies thought was so awesome. Let's hear the battle cry that weakened the knees of mountain ewes.
Bring down the temple with your lift righto textile pedon.
Oh, savior of the city, invent yourself salvation. After your parts are strewn around the brickyard, you'll be glad enough to share the favors of a female grave with local dogs.
Son of the Nephilim, is there an angel to save you from this humiliation? Instead of mocking the savage, they turn their scorn on you.
Enough. Enough.
Before you go, Sir Alchemist, answer us our riddle. What's 2/3 hydrogen plus 1/3 oxygen, but can't get through a fishnet?
Gilgamesh is a son of man. If he falls, he falls.
Down we go with him.
Yes, go hide in your kiln where Enkidu can't find you.
Gilgamesh saunters off, draped in the net. They make a show of kicking him out. Animated by their own bravery, they snatch the Triskelion gonfalon from the troopers, who thereupon draw their swords. The traitors move to the rescue with suddenly revealed short swords in one hand and their formidable crooks in the other. Norkid wades in with bare hands to make peace among them, while one of the Optimates tries to trample the Triskelion. Another Optimate gives a little scream. Gilgamesh re-enters at another point to watch unseen.
Order. Stay.
Yes, harden your codpiece with glaze.
Go play with your erecto testro Gilgaheathen.
Don't look here for any straightforward nanny goat that doesn't know the world is made for horny billies.
Calling out to Gilgamesh as they think.
Silence for the coronation. For shame on Enlil's wedding feast, nor will the new king be any better pleased.
With dignity, commotion ceases, the Triskelion is restored.
Rector, give me peace or clear the court.
Adjusting his spectacles, troopers and traders deployed to positions of control. A moment of silence.
I will if he does not. While I'm alive, he won't turn temple mummery into a coup d'etat.
Temporarily we submit to force. There'll be no holy war if the principal trial takes place according to the law.
The law is priestcraft. The law is Gilgamesh. We can extirpate your priestcraft.
I deign to answer houseless nomads and rabid fascists only with my opinion that the bull which goeth before the herd is but a cattle like those that follow.
Troopers and traders slowly return to their former places.
Sufficient unto the day is the anxiety thereof. That's this fascist motto. But if Gilgamesh won't deign to scotch the snakes that hatch before our eyes, I have no such compulsion. Thinking of the future, I've been known to forget the orders, my orders.
Captain, you are an honorable soldier.
My tongue has no bones and wags as it will. An occupational compensation for our mindless rote. Man, as you were.
Let the rite proceed.
Ceremony resumes.
My sword palm itches to churn some flesh. Gilgamesh is not here now to protect the owners of our rightful spoils.
Troopers and traders converse with each other in the foreground. Behind them, the rector invests Enkidu with Gilgamesh's mantle. In dumb show, Enkidu, while still bewildered by civilization, prompted by the rector, accepts the rod and ring from Lilamin. He is then led to the empty throne beside her and crowned with Gilgamesh's mask.
There's no use in plunder if you can't take it with you, and it's better to hack your way home after a feast than slay your host before he serves the eats. No one's going to be poisoned if we make the Ayatollah taste it first.
What about us? We're dead already. This swarm of drones covets our imported goods. They also want the daughters back that were given us for wives by the erstwhile liberator who confiscated their temple treasury to pay for a pile of bricks. It doesn't make them hate us the less that he, our only defender, has surrendered to their folklore. The chief idolater is no priest of reconciliation.
Oh, be of good cheer. Gilgamesh hasn't lost his nerve. He studies dreams too much, and for the moment, some kingdom in his head seems more important, but our troubles fade as Mirthra's fire climbs the zodiac.
Speak shyly and haltingly what he's tried to memorize.
O Lady Amin, highmost priest and optimates of Europe, O great women's and man, many as sands, I have shaking in the gates at my arm. Soon with hand I break arch enemy on earth of Inanna.
Chanting in unison, chanting in dance.
As earlier with human hands, you unset human snares for beasts, and then for humans laid the lion low. Deliver us from evil now.
Touches Enkidu's head with blood from Lilamin's sacrificial dish.
I anoint Enkidu, imperator of the Epacts, to try his strength against Gilgamesh, and if he fails the verdict, to perish in his stead. Take up kingship of the feast, to command us as you will, until you lose or win the place you sit in.
Do I what speak you? I ready be for old bull of April value blood. One life from two will blow away on wind. I kill him to Lady God and cover God. Me city king all years will be.
Speaks haltingly, but with gradually gained confidence.
Women and men, raise your joyful cry. Oi, oi, oi.
Intoned as an antiphonal litany.
Sleep not until the new year cracks its shell.
Lest Enlil frown upon the black-haired folk in everlasting night. Sleep not until the night's dark lid begins to open, until you see the slitted eye of light.
lest his bridal bed be made a nesting place for vultures. Sleep not until you hark a voice from the east with tidings of the silver crescent.
Lest the house of our gods be filled with dust and leveled like a desert tomb.
Lest the merciless sun cake dry all mud with cracks and choke with sand the living waters.
Lest time go on without return.
Give ear for word of Inanna, her skyboat. Wish for the horns, watch for the horns of her bullock.
It's not the moon that sprouts beer barley, so how can she inaugurate a year? They don't understand the constant mill of time. Mithra lingers and retreats, but he never wanes.
When on high the gods chose Enlil to weave all destinies.
The harlot they call a queen, she wasn't good enough for a blasphemous king, but for them, she's pure Messiah.
The patriarchal should have more respect for ladies of the cloth. She's the finest kind. Have you ever seen her dance? Or have you lost the yen, what, with all your wives?
Nobody but Gilgamesh would refuse to touch the one woman anywhere that's his own true match.
But the perfect bride from folk to God? For God to folk?
They lead Lilamine down from her throne, removing her mask and robes, leaving her dressed only in the blue bridal veil.
A pious bride. May our full, perfect, and living sacrifice be gladly received by her mystic bridegroom, and let her beatitude bring upon us gifts of God. Let us make communion by the light of stars, by the shadow of our Lord on her skin, by the first sweet gloom of moon, Enlil greets his lovely bride.
Kneeling before her, he loops a white cord 3 times about her waist and ties it lightly. His ritual prayer gradually grows more personal in address. Everyone falls silent as his voice lowers. Breaking off, he kisses her feet passionately.
Weep not for garments, my lady, when the Lord of gods has gently plucked this knotted cord. Your gleaming skin will adorn the incensed linen like a cloven pearl. In the fearless manner of desire, like the petals of a lily, you must receive the Savior of us all. Then shall you be reclothed in tender caresses and dressed in Enlil's misty, salt, sweet breath. His sea-soft hand will gently warm your bud-tipped breast. You shall feel his kiss on your lips. He will come unto you with lifted glory. Your knees shall be parted by his golden ivory thigh.
O my sister Lilamine, Lilamine, the rapture of your God is forbidden to your priest. In every other sacrifice I have proved that I grudge the great Enlil nothing I can have or know nor life itself. But I give him you in anguish. I forebode the leaven by which a god may infuse the beatitude that women dare not dream of. I dread that he will utterly consume you. Why should earth's jealous father release from divine atonement the most precious daughter of mankind and restore to me the life that illuminates my humble altar? For me of all men, it is most unlawful to serve as his attorney at love. He does not favor the testimony of my unhallowed desire.
Eurykians stir uneasily. The widows lead her to the tower stairs. The rector remains on his knees. Slowly, Lilamine disappears up the stairs. The widows return, dancing accompaniment to the rector's private prayer, and come to a stand between troopers and traitors.
I cannot follow you to heaven, yet I am the solicitor of Uruk, and thus as lawyer to you, the city's proxy, though before a bar too high for human counsel, I arraign our accursed warlord's tower for raising your bridal bed too high.
Thus spake the all-too-human Pope. This mespot duty still unfolds a few surprises.
Me, peoples love me. I love all body.
He shouts and smiles spontaneously, growing more and more excited, to the amusement of everyone except the rector, who arises and turns away to recover himself.
Thus spake orangutan.
Our ox is jealous of the Lord.
Amazed.
Listen for the sighs of fathers.
Hearken to the songs of young husbands.
Guess the yearnings of blood-stirred boys.
They dance little by little. Everybody's solemnity yields to merriment, and the rite dissolves into general festivity.
The bull will lift his head in pasture.
And the cow will lift her tail when Lillimene makes Enlil love.
Journeymen will set loose like cowboys.
To lift the skirts of wedded girls when Lillimene makes love in the sky.
7,000 times, 7 are the bids that await 7,000 wives, baking folds of soft white bread. Pray not to waste a single drop of pearly yeast. Swim swiftly, sweet Euphrates, until we end this dance.
Merrily, merrily, merrily.
Do not lose the chance.
Thumps heavily, smiling and genial, signaling the end of formality.
Yes, dear guests of Uruk, it's not for you to watch this wedding in solemn silence. Strangers, welcome. Citizens, rejoice. Your choice of meat, wild boar killed by Enkidu without a wound, or succulent lamb well drained of blood to suit those that bring us salt. Custom is suspended, let innocence drown all wisdom. Eat, drink, and dance, for the world may end tomorrow.
Enkidu lays the Gilgamesh mask on the seat and puts the ring of office on his head like a rakish garland, handling the rod like a swagger stick.
Your Highness, lead us to the end of time.
Ask your whim, Enkidu the First. Rule thou our disorder.
Is all women the same?
Does not each stick make its own smoke?
Optimists go off with Enkidu, capering. To Eber, gesturing cordial invitation.
May it please your honor and his distinguished sons. Our banquet is afforded by the economy you teach us. General welfare offends no god.
I have made no pact, your grace.
Our humble gratitude entails no obligation to the guest. On holiday, we shed all cares of office.
Come along, Eb. There's nothing wrong with a truce. It can't hurt to help warm up the fun, King, as long as we're cold sober before it's over.
Bowing to the rector.
Then my thanks already for your hospitality pro tem.
Taking them both by the arm.
As long as our Gilgamesh remains the autocrat ontologically.
I've always admired your vocabulary.
It comes from cosmopolitan occupations. Take us to the belly dancers.
Norkid, Rector, and Eber go off, smiling at each other.
You could do worse than take your father's hint.
To the traders.
You called us some goddamn awful names.
I did think the best part of you ran down your mother's leg.
Maybe we could be rehabilitated.
With some beer, we could discuss your therapy.
Yes, ma'am.
Troopers dash off.
This is the dance of rising sap.
Widows mimic.
For a palm to bear dates, seed must find its way to her flower.
I'm more for sap than seed, but these tame traders are famous for their fructification.
So well married, I thought it would take a devil to make me wicked. But I must admit, your torso is savory to my eye already.
Your eyes are nice, but you're not pictures. Our temple is not that kind of museum.
Would you like to hear some tent music?
Troopers return, each with a jug and long straw.
First, we wet our whistles. Let's all suck the fennel stalk.
A toast to the fifth and final sense.
A widow, a trader, and a trooper take turns at each straw.
Drink to the supreme sacrifice.
If it's a sacrifice, who wants to live forever?
Of course, it's a small thing to want a woman.
For me, it's a small thing after I get what I want.
Traders dance.
But not for long, I hope. You should consult a specialist.
According to the whispers of our exogamous sisters, we may have more to learn than teach from these educated sheikhs.
Pointing to Trooper 2, troopers get up to do a sword dance.
They're charming when they make us sheep eyes, but I lean toward military men. The Northmen now that wrinkles up his nose every time he lets an arrow fly. I always like to watch him shoot.
On their feet, both these types have pros and cons, judging by song and dance until they meet the test. Let's award a bouquet of fig blossoms to all these handsome guests.
Widows keep sipping away as they produce dainty food. Traders and troopers eat morsels.
Praise be to Ishtar that it's not a prize of cherries.
I'll separate rams from billy goats by the way they bite and chew my seed cakes.
For my part, gentlemen, draw straws.
A trooper and a trader draw from different jugs.
There is nothing to choose between them. They deserve equal entertainment. Praise be to Mithra and Shaddai both. We're neither maids nor wives. Let no one rise from this feast unsatisfied. The night's as long as the day.
She claps with glee, throwing aside the straws. They take turns drinking from the jugs on the fly. Troopers, widows, and traders dancing in a ring.
But not long enough. Somebody asked Gizax to hold back the sun.
Not today, he wouldn't. Don't forget his sexagesmal system and zero impact.
Oh, a stitch in the bush saves 9 in time. I didn't take the veil for contemplation and celestial studies.
Brethren and sistren, it's useless to be shrewd.
Single rhymes that blow like the wind.
No weight, no white who dares complain or frown will be allowed to lift my gown.
There's almost nothing half so sweet as your exotic heaps of wheat.
When we
finish
all these beers, we'll quit the
core
of engineers.
Behold, I shall climb into the highest palm tree and take hold of all its branches.
Widows, troopers, and traders snake dance off to the banquet. Gilgamesh comes to the opposite side, walking backward to look after them with amusement, and disappears.
Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you all of the readers. That was a lot of fun. All right, I've got Catherine asked me to make some remarks about the connection between the play and the novel in which it appears. The 7 tablets that make up the Tower of Gilgamesh are interspersed between the early and middle chapters of the novel Gloucestertide, which is the 2nd volume of Jonathan Bayliss's Gloucesterman trilogy. In the novel, the play has been written by one of that novel's central characters, a young man named Caleb Karsist, who, like many young writers, is struggling to turn the play into what he wants it to be, and also struggling to make himself sit down and actually write. On page 6 of the novel, Caleb confesses, "Sometimes I hate to look at that typewriter in the next room. It's strange how often I can forget it entirely. I am not a born playwright." Then on page 47, when Tessa Barebones asks Caleb, "What's your play about?" the narrator of the novel tells us it was the question he always dreaded. No short answer could fail to be misleading. And so Caleb replies, among other things, the riddle of how to construct a regular triangle from isosceles perpendiculars on more than one plane. This tells poor Tessa very little, and the riddle is beyond the limits of my recollected high school geometry. But if we have a tetrahedron, which is a 3-sided pyramid whose base forms its 4th side, and we drop a line from the point at the top of the pyramid to the midpoint of each of the 3 lines that form its base, the lines that we drop will be perpendicular to the lines that form the base. That's as close as I can get to isosceles parallels. However, if we construct a second pyramid from those 3 lines that we've dropped, its base will be a regular triangle, but the other 3 triangles will be isosceles and not regular. I'm a poor mathematician, however, so please don't take my word for this. A bit later in the novel, Caleb is thinking about his friend, Dr. Charlemagne, a character based loosely on the poet Charles Olson. Dr. Charlemagne is primarily a playwright, not a poet, and his work has not won him a large audience. In fact, on page 81, Caleb notes that the doctor's almost clandestine theatrical productions are few in number and small in attendance. This question of audience applies as well to the work of Jonathan Bayliss, whose novels are unlikely ever to appeal to the casual or general reader. Like Dr. Charlemagne's plays, Bayliss's novels are in search of their audience. This reminds me of John Milton in Book 7 of Paradise Lost, where the poet states that he seeks for his work fit audience, though few. And Caleb in the novel recalls Doc quoting Yeats on the theater Yeats imagines for Dublin. Yeats says, "We must make a theater for ourselves and our friends," which I take to mean for a small, like-minded group. In Ireland, of course, this would become the famous Abbey Theatre, but the Abbey was never famous for its ability to turn a profit or appeal to a large audience. Throughout its history, it relied on subsidies in order to stage its productions, or it would have gone out of business. It's been 15 years since I read Gloucestertide, so I may be missing some of that novel's references to the play, but I have three more short ones to set before you. On page 85, Caleb mentions his confoundingly tractable plan for a Gilgamesh trilogy and its satyr play, which I confess puzzles me. If something is confounding, then that thing is the opposite of tractable, at least as I understand those words. But there you have it. Caleb speaks of his confoundingly tractable plan for a Gilgamesh trilogy and its satyr play. Like the trilogies of ancient Greek tragedy, each of which was accompanied by a satyr play. So are we meant to understand the Tower of Gilgamesh as the first part of this trilogy? I don't know. The novel doesn't make that clear. Late in the novel, on page 335, after Tablet 7 has appeared, and so the play has been completed, Caleb tells us that one of the things that especially engaged him at the moment is revising the Tower of Gilgamesh, which sounds hopeful. Earlier, he had trouble getting to his typewriter to work on it. Now he's eager to revise it. But then on page 466, the narrator tells us the Tower of Gilgamesh having been finished for the nonce, Caleb knew not what to do with it except to hide it away in a bank safe deposit box until its uncomic complement was written. What uncomic complement is this? Certainly not a satyr play, which would have been comic. Can he mean the other two parts of the trilogy he mentioned earlier, or has he rejected the whole trilogy plan? And are we meant to understand this play as comic in relation to the complementary part that will follow it? Perhaps. At any rate, poor Caleb does not seem entirely pleased with the play in its current form, for he says to himself, certainly, it was not fit to be put before the eyes of Dr. Charlemagne, nor does Caleb want to offer it to the local theater company, for he is certain that its cast would outnumber any likely audience. And whenever the cast of a play outnumbers the audience, that production is rarely viewed as a success. How else is this play connected to the novel in which it appears? There are no gods or goddesses in the novel unless we define those terms very, very loosely. And no wild men like Enkidu, no soldiers or Kassite troopers. No great tower is built that will link earth to heaven. But the play's prologue and the play itself are supposed to have been written by the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. And in the prologue, Herodotus tells us that he wrote the play as he was imagining what he calls the tensions and conflicts that Gilgamesh must have experienced at the fountainhead of culture. The play, as we have it, suggests that at the fountainhead of culture, which seems to mean urban culture. I'm sorry, back to that sentence. The play suggests that at the fountainhead of culture, which seems to mean urban culture, we would have seen people who devote their entire lives to commerce. This would be Eber and his sons in the play who allied themselves with Gilgamesh, as well as a professional standing army. This would be Norkid and his Kassite guard who served Gilgamesh. Agriculture and religion, which already existed in Uruk before Gilgamesh appears, the play seems to suggest are insufficient to create an urban culture. Some of the tensions and conflicts mentioned by Herodotus are presented to us also in the very helpful summary of the play that Catherine and Diane have prepared and sent to each of us. In that summary, they emphasize the tension between Gilgamesh and the traditional society of Uruk, which is represented by the rector, the widows, the optimates, and Lilimen. Gilgamesh's engineering projects and cultural changes, Catherine and Diane write, have sown tension, and indeed they have. Very broadly speaking, the play's action is built around the conflict between the people of Uruk, who organize their lives according to long-standing traditions and believe that the gods are in complete control of their destiny, and Gilgamesh's desire that they abandon their traditional way of living and embrace lives grounded in reason and free will. So, will a bountiful harvest be produced by the ritual sacred marriage, the hierogamy of the priestess Lilimen with the sky god Enlil? Or will those things be better produced by Gilgamesh's irrigation projects? It's one of the tensions. Will Gilgamesh succeed in persuading the people to replace their lunar calendar with a solar calendar? Can he persuade them to abandon their belief that at the New Year festival, their gods will actually decree their fates for the new year? In Tablet 6, we see Gilgamesh participating half-heartedly and often ironically in the New Year ritual. He's willing to confess his transgressions, to renounce his insubordinate ways, and he gives up the rod and the ring, which are given to his ritual challenger Enkidu. But it's clear that Gilgamesh thinks this whole thing is nonsense. He's not a serious participant in the ritual. He even allows himself to be covered with a net, and he seems willing to engage in ritual combat with Enkidu, who has been told that if he kills Gilgamesh, then he will be king. But if you peek ahead to Tablet 7, you'll see that that ritual combat ends with Gilgamesh and Enkidu becoming friends, after which they enter the temple and they smash the tablets of fate. It's a pretty dramatic moment near the end of the play. However, that does not cause Lilimen to change her mind. She doesn't change what she believes at all, at least immediately. So what might lead the people of Uruk to give up their traditional way of life, their view of the gods, and embrace the kind of urban culture that Gilgamesh promises? The play doesn't tell us, but if we think about history, then perhaps only violence or the threat of violence. There seems to be no easy solution. And this, I think, also ties in with what Diane was talking about earlier, about a patriarchal society or organization of society displacing an earlier matriarchal society. In these tensions, the play is broadly analogous to the novel, which is also based around conflicts and tensions. For example, Caleb Karsist's life is an arena of tensions and conflicts. As a healthy young man, he is interested in a love life, but his erotic attentions are divided among Lillian Cloud, Belle Singani, and Gloria Keith, at least as well as I can recall. There may have been others. Caleb struggles to balance his time and his energy among his creative and intellectual projects, his need to work to generate an income, his physical exercise. He's a long-distance runner. That takes up time. Caring for his dog, whom he cares for very deeply and seriously, which means taking long, time-consuming walks. The work he does for Father Duncannon, who leads an obscure branch of what seems to be the Anglican Church, but attracts an audience as small as the plays of Dr. Charlemagne, but that work takes up time. And then he also has a social life. He has friends he wants to keep up with. Pulled in so many competing directions, how can he lead the kind of rich, varied, and meaningful life that he wants to lead? How can he lead a good life, a humane and civilized life? How can he accomplish everything that he wants to accomplish? These, of course, are the kinds of questions that people have struggled with for many centuries and continue to struggle with. In the original Gilgamesh, the hero and his friend Enkidu are arrogant, brutal, and aggressive. Gilgamesh takes any young man or woman that he wants from among the people of Uruk, and he does what he wants with them. He and Enkidu steal timber from the mountains of Lebanon, where with the help of some of the gods, they defeat the giant Humbaba. And when Humbaba pleads for mercy, they mock him, and just before they kill him, he curses them to the gods. They've gone too far. When they return, the goddess Ishtar invites Gilgamesh to be her husband, and he says no. He tells her to her face that she has killed or injured too many lovers in her time. And so in her anger, she persuades the gods to send the bull of heaven to attack Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But they kill the bull, And then they mock and they humiliate the goddess Ishtar. So finally, the gods decree that one of these two must die, and they choose Enkidu, whose death shakes Gilgamesh deeply. It's the first time in the poem we see him shaken by anything. Timor mortis conturbat me was the medieval phrase. The fear of death disturbs me, haunts me. Gilgamesh is suddenly viscerally aware that he will die, and he can't stop thinking about this. And so he embarks upon a great quest in search of immortality. But this quest is fruitless, and Gilgamesh returns to Uruk. Caleb tells Tessa that his play is about a geometry riddle, the problem he's trying to solve. His life and its myriad complications are another kind of riddle, as are the tensions besetting Gilgamesh in Jonathan Bayliss's play, as is the mystery and conflict of our own mortality. So I think those are some of the ways maybe that the play connects with the novel. And now I'm happy to turn it over to all of you for your observations, questions, whatever you have.
Were you saying satyr play as S-E-D-E-R?
No, S-A-T-Y-R.
Oh,
Satyr, you know, the half goat, half man figure.
okay.
Yeah. All of the tragedy to the tragic trilogies of ancient Greece would be accompanied by a satyr play, which is a kind of a comedy, apparently.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
If I might, being a theater historian by background, satyr plays were plays that were principally sexual in nature. Because all of the Greek plays were presented as part of the worship of Dionysus, and Dionysus was a god of fecundity and sexuality. But we do not have a single surviving satyr play. So we don't actually know what the contents were like. We have small pieces of a bunch of different ones, but they're really small.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that we don't know that much, except that they existed and what they were supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't. I guess I said too much when I said that they were comic. I guess my assumption is that a figure like Priapus in mythology was typically a comic figure, treated comically, and so I made the assumption, which might not be fair.
I think the impression was that they were definitely raunchy.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Well, we do have some vase painted images from some of the choruses and characters from the satyr plays, and all of the actors were men in those dramas. So in the satyr plays, there are lots of big stuffed phalluses and other genitalia, both male and female, that were stuffed, enlarged, and comic in their way. But Dionysus was all about all of the things that kept culture going, both children and your farm animals and crops, and all of that stuff was part of that.
Grapes and wine.
Well, that's because that he's the god of chaos. So, I mean, Nietzsche gave us the Apollonian versus the Dionysian, and that's sort of pushed forward in a lot of different ways. But the Greeks believed in the trying to be equal in all things. So you didn't want to go overboard anyways. So on the one hand, it was great to be Apollonian and very logical and seeking for the light, but you needed to take the other side of human nature into under your consideration also. And that's kind of the danger of the chaos that is in the storm and the hurricane and sexuality, and his priestesses all had to be drunk because that was where the madness of Dionysus came to the fore. You would lose your Apollonian control.
With the back eye.
Yes.
Seems like JB must have known a lot of that and put it into this play. Subtly, or not so subtly.
Well, there is this theme that runs, we keep coming back to it in our book group about the chthonic, the dromenon, the sort of visceral, nonverbal expression of some sort of essence of life that he constantly circles around, but never quite spells out. But it's clearly there. You know, this goes back, I think, to chthonic rituals and stuff like that that went, that were part of the sort of Proto-Grecian ethos or worldview or zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it. He keeps looking for that and hinting at it, but at least as far as we've gotten into 3/4 of the way through, I can't quite put my finger on it.
The Gloucester Mass Festival is clearly Dionysian, right?
Hmm. Anyone who's been at the St. Peter's Club on Sunday afternoon can attest to that.
So one thing I didn't mention in my comments is that the character Caleb Karsis, one of his big projects in the trilogy is a theory of tragedy that he's working on. And as I was rereading this play, I kept thinking about that. It doesn't, I don't know, does it strike you as a tragedy or not? The Tower of Gilgamesh. I'll just throw that out there.
JB describes it as comic, a comedy.
Yeah, right. And so it's, yeah, he does. Although
There is
Caleb
another,
later,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, you go ahead, Catherine.
Well, there is another play that we'll want to do someday called The Axe of Gilgamesh. And
Yeah.
that is a tragedy. And in this pandemic year, it doesn't seem like something we should be reading. But someday when we're all happy, we can read this tragedy together.
Yeah, Caleb does say at one point, he speaks about a tragedy that he has in mind, right? A tragedy with its satyr play. So, I mean, in ancient Greece, those trilogies would have been tragic. I'm not aware, George, maybe you can correct me, but I'm not aware of any trilogy like that was comic.
Trilogies.
Yeah. So the ancient Greek trilogies, they were tragic. They would not have been comic. Would they have?
No, the playwrights submitted a series of tragedies, which were not necessarily linked in a satyr play. And then there was a separate comic competition.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what Caleb had in mind in terms of the final shape of this project.
Didn't Mel Brooks say that if something bad happens to him, that's a tragedy, and if something bad happens to you, that's a comedy?
He probably did.
Yeah.
Somebody else said that farce is tragedy at 1,000 RPM. So it's within tragedy there is the potential for farce. And not all comedy was humorous, although Aristophanes and the great comic playwrights were, but a lot of them had tragic episodes along the way. It's just in the end, they ended up getting to a positive place.
Mm-hmm. This play has funny scenes. It's definitely funny in parts, but when I think about the general direction of the play, I don't see this ending happily. This tension that that Diane and Catherine talked about in their summary. Somebody's going to get hurt, right? Gilgamesh wants things his way, and the rector and Liliman want things their way, and yeah, somebody's going to get hurt.
Well, I think that was the tension that's throughout all of Jonathan's work, is the part of him that was very intellectual, very cerebral, very Gilgamesh in the outline of the play. And there was this part of him, which he alludes to in some of his stuff about the ritual of the church, that was craving for some sort of visceral, nonverbal, spiritual understanding. And I don't think he ever got, but the tension was always there. I don't think he ever quite resolved it. I think that's you go through 4,000 pages and I'm not sure it ever gets resolved. But the tension is always there. I don't know, I haven't read the last volume yet, so maybe he does wrap it all up in a nice little bow. We'll find out.
Maybe it's human nature and it'll never be resolved.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct, Diane. We remember back in, was it 1990, after the Berlin Wall came down and people were announcing the end of history and how wrong they were, right? So do we have other questions or comments? Or, well, again, let me say thank you to all of the readers. I thought you guys did a splendid job for, I don't believe there were any practices, were there? This was the first run through. So that was really very well done. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
And Gary.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gary. Thanks.
For that.
Wonderful job.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks to you both.
Very, very enjoyable.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye, everybody.